lives. The magic doesn't live there in the sort of day-to-day routine tasks. It lives in a much deeper place, a dynamic place, and there's an energy. You won't find anybody in ASDAN who is driven by their employment contract. They're driven by a sense of a vocation, and I think that's the one thing I picked up very early on when I joined. They have a sort of set of skills and expertise and experiences that I don't think you will be able to match very quickly.
Welcome to the Cross Sector Lab podcast. This year we celebrate our 35th anniversary, the 35th year since our first learners passed their first ASDAN qualifications. So in this episode, I am joined by three of our greatest advocates, Brian, who's our Chair of Trustees, Alison, our newest patron, and Jim Knight, who has been our patron for over the last decade. They've really helped us shape where ASDAN is going and thinking about our future as well as our past. Together within this podcast, we really get into where ASDAN has come from and why it matters. Why does its mission really matter? And where does it sit in this next tide of education and this landscape that's moving and shifting around us every day? It was a genuinely lovely conversation to be part of, and I really hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Through the changing tides of education and the occasional flood, ASDAN has stood firm over the last 3 decades, meeting the needs of learners who often find themselves navigating systems that haven't been designed for them in mind. ASDAN was established as a charity, and I think sometimes we forget that it is a charity as well as an awarding organisation. And it was set up with clear intent to make education an equitable space for achievement where all learners can discover, develop and make full use of their abilities. From the earliest days till now, ASDAN has worked to ensure that learning is not something done to young people, but is something that enables them to understand who they are, what they can do and where they belong. So today we're celebrating our 35th anniversary from when our first learners achieved ASDAN qualifications. And I'm joined in today's conversation with 3 powerful advocates of the work ASDAN does. So firstly, I'd like to introduce you to Brian, who is the Chair of Trustees at ASDAN. Alison Peacock, who is our newest patron, welcome. And Jim, who has been our long-standing patron. And he's still here. So together we are going to explore not just ASDAN and where it's come from, but why its mission matters now more than ever and where the next tide of education might take us. Okay, so if you're all ready, my first question to all of you, and then I've kind of tied it into individual questions to try and be helpful. It might not be helpful. What was it about ASDAN that made each of you feel to stand alongside us? And what's kept you here, if you've been here a while, especially as the education landscape has shifted so significantly just in the last few months, let alone the last decade? So Jim, really to you, over the last decade, how have you seen that influence extend both internationally and domestically? And what does that tell you about the universality of the approach of ASDAN?
Well, look, it's been a joy being associated with ASDAN over the years. And the attraction comes down to the core of what ASDAN does in terms of its equity mission and the inclusive nature of what it does, and a certain amount of innovation and that idea of young people planning, doing, growing, reflecting. When we've been through times recently with the knowledge-rich curriculum and everything that goes with that, to have an alternative that works for those for whom that doesn't really work, I think has been really important, and that's at the heart of, I think, why it's now been able to have a lot of traction internationally, is that approach of, and when I travel internationally and talk to governments around the world, they are increasingly concerned about how to include all learners, and making having qualifications that incentivize the learning to be relevant to young people, to be practical where it can be, as well as being rooted in standards and rigor, it's just a really nice marriage that exports really well, and I think equips people really well for an uncertain future.
No, I completely agree with you. We've had some international meetings recently where that is exactly what they're telling us that they're looking for. So, Alison, what is it about this moment in education and the workforce that makes ASDAN's work feel particularly relevant now, supporting that workforce in education?
So I think it's really important. I, together with a group of other organisations, lead Next Generation Assessment, and we are looking to find ways of enabling all learners to achieve success. And ASDAN does that so brilliantly. And I was also drawn to ASDAN by you. It was, we had a meeting and I just thought, here's somebody who completely, we just resonate with each other. The work that I'd done, the research I'd done around Learning Without Limits, which is all about how do we enable every child to see themselves as successful in whichever domain they feel they can flourish the most effectively. We need our schools to be those places, and having a suite of qualifications that really provides that opportunity for every learner to be able to say, I've done this, I've achieved this, I've got this to show for, is so, so important. So I think right now in education, there's a lot of grand ideas and lots of talk. I think we need some reality on the ground. And I think what I'm seeing ASDAN doing is exactly that, providing a route for learners, but also a route for schools that want to be able to embrace everybody in the way that we've described. So, hurrah.
Brilliant. We shall keep on doing that. So, Brian, what have you seen over the last couple of years that signals ASDAN's re-emergence and kind of renewed clarity of purpose?
Well, I've been always a great advocate of us knowing about our context. I think until we understand that, I think it's going to be a struggle to understand very much at all, to be honest. And it's clear now, when we look at it even from the outside, that there's some kind of conversion going on. And some of that's come out here. But I think to understand that, we have to identify the convergence that's happening. And that convergence is of things of mixed nature, really. Some of them have been here before, and some have arrived recently, but put them together and you've got a kind of, I don't know if it's a synchronicity or a serendipity, but something's happening that has not managed to happen before, although elements of it certainly have. And there's obvious things in there, like, I don't know, our beliefs, our values, the kind of things we do. But we've got a different set of skills now, a different set of experience, different set of expertise coming to play. There's different personalities, definitely. You can feel the personalities are more engaged, more engaging, if you like. We've also had two other things, though, that have come along that I've not seen come together really before. And one is a mood, and that's what you can put it down to, is a mood that is different to perhaps the one we had at the turn of the decade. That mood is definitely different now. But also there's, and I think I'll pick up from what you're saying, there's also a kind of circumstance that's happening. There's a wider thing going on. And that's changed us, and that's changed us very quickly. And it was a bit scary at first, but it's a positive change, no two ways about that. And I think we had a lot of caution. There was definitely, certainly going into and coming out of lockdown, there was loads of caution. But I don't see caution now. You definitely feel ambition.
Glad you said ambition and not risk then.
Yeah, no, definitely see ambition.
I think the charities come back to where it should be, whilst the awarding organisation was very focused, because within education, awards and assessments and the Ofqual regulations had been not movable but difficult to navigate. So I think ASDAN had got to a place where it had to concentrate on that. And now the charitable outcomes and aims have come back into play, so we can bring those two things together.
We're getting the message out there. There's no two ways about that. The message is definitely getting out there. But I think what is harder to see from the outside is that we're listening a lot more. And that brings us straight back to the context, really. We're learner voice, for example. We get learner voice. We got special interest groups. We talk more amongst ourselves, and we do far more reconnaissance, if you like, and make use of that as a kind of active listening. We not only reflect on it, I think we act on it and consider it. And that's been very useful, I think.
So ASDAN has always worked at the edges, I think, of the system, that we're still working around the edges, but I think we kind of belong there because we can have a good look in at what's going on. And often where pedagogy and inclusion and the real world learning meets, I think that's where ASDAN has taken this next stage of the way in which it's evolving. So Alison, through your work with the Chartered College, how important is teacher agency in delivering equitable pedagogy, particularly for learners whose strengths aren't always visible on the eye straight away, not always visible to traditional systems, I think?
So, the Chartered College, we have a commission right now looking at teacher agency, which is a group of academics and practitioners led brilliantly by our Director of Research, Dr. Lisa Maria Muller. And that whole work around teacher agency, I think, is absolutely fundamental because I feel as though in the last decade, there was a kind of rush to sort of say, well, we just need to sort everything out, and if we can just have the script, then everybody will know what they're doing, and we can bottom out any kind of disparities in quality of teaching because everybody will have the same script and they'll know what to do. And the reality is, of course, anybody like me who's been teaching forever knows that every class that you engage with, leave alone the individuals within those classes, they're all individual. And if we take the attitude that we need to just forget about individuality, we need to forget about motivation, we just need to be in delivery mode as a teacher, then essentially we remove all agency from the teaching dynamic. And that means we lose the very essence, it strikes me, of what it means to be a professional. So I'm not saying we need to go back to everybody starting from scratch and developing all their own resources and everything like that. But we do need to have teachers feeling that they can respond in the moment to any situation, any comment, something that occurs, that they can capitalize on that and really make it meaningful, because that is much more likely to take your group of learners with you in a way that is hopefully far more productive ultimately than just following through the next slide. And particularly for the kinds of learners that ASDAN is really supporting. Those youngsters may well not find it easy to sit passively and they might sit passively, it doesn't mean they're learning. And so there's all the kinds of complexities that I think teacher agency addresses. The Chartered College is really focused on how do we build the expertise that means that the agency is accompanied by really strong, informed decision making rather than just doing whatever comes into your head as a teacher.
Jim, over to you on that note. How does this approach that I've just kind of talked about around the fact that these real world skills are not necessarily being met by pedagogy that we are presently being driven by, how does that learning kind of translate, do you think, across international systems and the labour market as well?
Sure. And obviously the labour market is hugely dynamic at the moment and very unpredictable. And it's creating quite a lot of challenge for school system design.
Definitely.
And, I was schools minister 20 years ago, shockingly. And, I'm part of the problem. I was part of driving a very high stakes accountability system that has resulted, I think, in more standardization of pedagogy, more exclusion, therefore, of more pupils. And we've then successfully exported that around the world, and partly it's because we've got some fantastic teachers in the workforce who've done a really great job in learning how to teach reading and writing and some of those basics better. And so people have looked at England in the PISA tables that rank different countries and gone, oh, England's doing really well. And so they're then taking everything lock, stock and barrel, regardless of the fact that in the same PISA tables, our kids their life satisfaction is on the floor compared to everybody else. So that there is a better way. One of the other problems of that sort of standardized approach is I don't think it's meeting the labour market need very well, because the danger is the accountability is forcing us into teaching sort of model answers to exam questions and teaching much more to the test, which isn't teaching thinking very well, is quite brittle for those learners when the future demands them to be able to think critically, to be more creative in their thinking, to be much more adaptable, to be lifelong learners. And what ASDAN offers through its portfolio approach, through more project-based learning, through more practical-based learning, more relevant learning, is something that aligns much better with that future focus. And so whilst you can celebrate being on the edges, the more we can bring ASDAN in from the margins and help inform, post the school's white paper, which I think has a lot of positives, post the curriculum assessment review, which have some positives, and take you more into the mainstream, I think that would be really welcome.
It's really interesting you're saying that. We looked last year at the World Economic Forum data, and the kind of the top, I think it is right hand side, it's got the 9 skills that are being lost internationally around employability, and the 6 DNA skills of ASDAN. And the reason it was set up are 6 of those 9 skills. So digitizing our programs online have allowed us to put a diagnostics in where teachers can see those 6 skills now grow and challenge them.
In a way, the irony is, in the future, we need our humans to be able to collaborate really well with AI-based machines. And yet we are training our kids, we're teaching, educating our kids, much as the same way as we train AI. Yeah, we cram them full of data and content and then ask them to regurgitate a right answer. That's what AI does. If we were to nurture them as humans so that they can bring out their human capabilities, they will compete and collaborate effectively with each other and with machines. And again, that's part of the ASDAN attraction.
Absolutely. I did a podcast a couple of weeks ago with Roger White, who was one of the founders. He tells me he wasn't the founder, he was one of many of ASDAN. And one of the things he is really cross that he never did was introduce learner voice. And you mentioned it earlier, Brian, and you have been a huge advocate for us really pulling that learner voice and ambassadors together. Why do you think that learner voice is so valuable to us?
Well, it's the reason we do it, really. We think we do it for the centres because they are the point of exchange, but we don't really. We do it for one step beyond. And I think sometimes we forget that. We're a charity and we're here for a reason. We're here for them. And if we're getting it wrong, we need to be told. But also, we don't only get told we're doing it wrong, we also get told what right would look like. And I think that's coming through, and that's certainly helping us at the moment.
And young people do that better than the adults, don't
Well,
they?
yes, they definitely do, yeah.
That's brilliant. So looking ahead, what responsibility does ASDAN carry now in your minds, not just about learners, but also the system, the workforce, because that's so crucial, I believe, that we've got to start getting that right. And what conversations do we need to be braver in leading or being part of? So first of all, to you, Jim, where can ASDAN contribute and influence global conversations? As you've just alluded to, you know that we're already starting those conversations, but really around skills and employability, but also alternative pathways, not just for those who are diagnosed with special needs, but those that are sitting on the margin without a recognition of their needs.
I think the voice that ASDAN can bring with authority is to help teachers move towards approaches and pedagogies and uses of technology that then allows them to wrap education much more around individuals, to move away from what works for the majority to what works for everybody. And you've got an amazing track record and huge credibility in knowing how to do that, not just through the SEND pupils that ASDAN has served, but through some of the gifted and talented, as we used to call them, through some of the project-based qualifications that ASDAN's got a heritage in as well. Those have traditionally been really hard to teach, and helping teachers relax about that, relax about how to use some of these AI tools that now might be able to help them hyper differentiate, help kids be able to research what they're really passionate about and understand what their role is in that relationship between the learner and the AI is also something that I think you can advance as you develop.
Definitely. I mean, again, moving all our courses onto the digital platform has been a huge step change for us. But that has allowed where our courses are all contextualized. So even the English short course that we have, because you can contextualize it. And so the teachers being braver to use technology and AI to investigate and explore what could that English course now look like? Because it's the investigation skills of English and the use of those skills that the course is marked on, assessed on, not necessarily Macbeth. It could be whatever that young person's most dominant interest is. And we've just been speaking to Careers and Enterprise Company around the foundation project qualification that we're launching in September. And how could that be used for options choices in year 9, that we can actually support young people make decisions based on research and reflecting on what is their future going to look like. Not, I just love art, but what will that bring purposely to you so they then want to be engaged?
The project qualifications at an extended level at Key Stage 5, they're well known and some universities give preferential offers. But we also know that disadvantaged pupils really struggle with that if they've not done HPQs, if they've not done FPQs, higher project qualification, foundation project qualifications, the white paper opens up the space around Key Stage 3. It'd be great if we saw more FPQs at the end of Key Stage 3 as an example. And yeah, those are great opportunities for you.
It's a way of learning. So our HPQ also comes out in September as well. And I think we've just seen that it's supporting those young people. Ours are all based with a vocational work based thought process. So we would love to see the HPQ wrapped around that 10-day, 2-week work placement. So it's a placement with purpose. It's not just something to go through, but allowing those young people to research it, participate in it, and review and reflect on it and demonstrate that they can do that. As an employer, you'd want to see young people being able to do that and hopefully bring some resilience with that as well. So Alison, what does a workforce look like that's truly enabled to develop equity within that pedagogy and that different, taking the risk? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, teachers are incredibly talented and brilliant, but also really, really, really busy. And so, as soon as there's any kind of reform, and you would know this, Jim, as soon as anything is suggested that means we're going to change things, there's a kind of, a sort of intake of breath that says, "Oh no, please, let's just leave it all as it is." The reality is, the white paper is clearly demanding change. The fact that we want to have a much more inclusive environment within our schools means that we need to be able to develop the curriculum and develop assessments that mean that all children have got a route through that they can see as purposeful and meaningful, and whether that's also about vocational routes. All of these things are really, really important. And teachers will need help in terms of how is this going to be enacted. Because it's one thing to subscribe to a vision, and it's another thing altogether to actually say, yeah, but how are we going to do this here?
Yeah.
And also, how are we going to do this with probably scant resources? How are we going to provide the staff development time that we're going to need? So there will be, I'm sure, a real opportunity for ASDAN at this point to be able to say, well, did you know that we're doing this? Did you know that just what you've just been describing, I'm sitting on the edge of my seat thinking, well, that sounds great. So I think the more that we can communicate the new products that are coming along stream, but also opportunities for teachers to kind of put their toe in the water and think, well, maybe we could try this in Key Stage 3, because that will be genuinely, I think, transformative. Because at the moment, Key Stage 3 at its worst is just preparation for Key Stage 4. I was speaking at a middle school's heads conference recently, and they were talking about the kind of curricula that they have. They haven't been constrained by the, essential preparation for GCSE in the same way that most of our secondary schools are. And so Key Stage 3 can be a hugely vibrant opportunity for our learners, and I think should be. So for me, that's an area that I'm really pleased that the white paper is kind of shining a light on. But there's everything to play for, I think. It's just giving teachers the confidence that it's not all going to be so much work they can't cope.
They can't. No, what we've been doing is talking to a lot of there's some quite proactive MATs who are looking at what is the inclusion hub going to be. And whilst we know ASDAN is not just around SEN, it's got a wider berth, so to speak, that it could be supporting. We've been talking to them about using the inclusion hub as a kind of a litmus test, a Petra disc of actually kind of working out what does work, what doesn't. And so those teachers who aren't necessarily involved in the inclusion hub could come in and do some peer-to-peer work around teaching strategies to take back out and kind of build that bravery within that school, and how the pupil engagement frameworks, as they get started to roll out, how actually by using ASDAN you can start demonstrating what was proxy data. It's not proxy, it's purposeful hardwiring data of the skills that young people need. So we're hoping that we can influence that and support that drive around the inclusion hubs.
I think that's absolutely fundamental to all of this. I've always believed that, if we're working with children, why aren't we actually asking them what they're interested in learning and how it's all coming across to them? Because essentially they're there all day long. They are our consumers. So again, within all of these developments, involving the young people in a meaningful way, I think is such a powerful means so that we're all on the same page. And it is, it is challenging when you're looking at reform, and it's challenging when you're looking at a system that currently is, frankly, really struggling with many youngsters who've got additional needs. I suspect the reason some of those children are struggling so much is because the curriculum and the way that we've been encouraged to lead our classrooms and manage our classrooms means those children aren't just don't feel welcome.
Mm.
And so we need to be able to provide support for teachers to embrace a pedagogy that is not about dumbing down. It's about highest standards, of course. The white paper is very clear about that, but is also about embracing a greater sense of diversity.
I think the word belonging has come up so often, hasn't it? But you need a space to know how you belong. And I think we haven't quite got that right, have we, for every learner
Not yet.
that's in our school buildings and outside of those buildings. So, Brian, from a governance perspective, how do we ensure ASDAN continues to balance growth, strategy and its charitable purpose? Because you know how passionate I am about that last bit.
Always sounds like when governance arrives, sort of the spoil sports have turned up, doesn't it? And I suppose in many ways that's a good thing, because I don't think I'd ever want it to get too lively or too excited. Governance is a bad thing, isn't it?
Governance to me and the board of trustees, what you do is you are the drivers to help us make those decisions and feel empowered to actually. Let's take those gentle risks. They're not big.
No, they are gentle risk and considered risk, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, Ali, when you listen to those three things, growth and the strategy and charitable purpose, if you like, they sound like they're mutually exclusive. You just listen to them. It sounds like you've given us a menu and we have to choose. When the reality is, I think they're more of a recipe that you have to combine, and probably with other things as well, if it's going to succeed. And then growth sounds like it's come from another discipline, doesn't it? It sounds like it's come from somewhere commercial, somewhere financial, that it's somehow not right. And yet I think it very much is, if we believe in what we do, extending the reach of that is absolutely fundamental to what we do. The trustees have a key role to play in that. And the trustees will obviously ask questions. They will review. They will support. There's no two ways about it. I think they'll definitely support. But they'll also allocate. I think they'll also permit. And, the danger is we think of it as a sort of groupthink. And anybody who's ever been to our board, it's anything but a groupthink. You've got a dozen different sets of expertise, different personalities, different experiences, really, all coming together to make us better than we would be, really, and ask questions that perhaps any one of us could never think of. And I think that takes us far closer to making ASDAN the best it can be, or all it can be, really.
No, definitely. I mean, you often, I say in the board meetings that you are the caretakers of this charity, and that's really important. And I think we do have a really strong board now that recognises that it's your role to caretake. We do the doing, but you're caretaking the charity, and it's long-term vision. The custodians, I just call them caretakers. I'm from a school. We're caretakers that keep it all clean and smoothly running. So I've got a closing question for all of you. So if ASDAN didn't exist, what would be missing? And why does that matter now more than ever? So what would be missing from our educational landscape if ASDAN wasn't here? Do you want to go first, Jim?
Happy to. Look, I mean, it's a repeat, really, of some of the things we talked about already, but we would miss the expertise, the qualifications that all lead to a more equitable, more inclusive school system that prepares our young people, whoever they are, whatever their circumstances, to thrive as adults. And we'd have to invent it.
Don't go and do that. It was so interesting meeting with Roger White in his discussion around, he didn't mention the words special needs at all, but his discussion around why ASDAN came to fruition, the loss of the CSEs and its purpose, and his vision of how it should be looking today, which was no different to how it was looking 35 years ago. And that was just a really lovely opportunity to hear that equity was why it came into fruition, and it still is why it's here. So that expands.
So I'd completely agree with everything you say, Jim. I think the additional factor is that if we didn't have ASDAN, we wouldn't have the prospect of innovation in the way that I'm hearing just in this podcast. The sense of opportunity. And for the young people that are particularly served by ASDAN, quite often they are the young people who get the least benefit of collective thinking. They're the people that kind of get pushed to one side. Other people's children is how it's sort of viewed sometimes, and you kind of think, no, this is about all of society benefiting from education. And so the work that ASDAN does can only get stronger, it seems to me. And certainly at the Chartered College, we'll do all that we can to support you.
And Brian, if we weren't here, what would be missing?
Well, first, having said all that about governance, our first duty is to make sure we are still here.
Exactly.
There's a lot of effort goes into making sure that we're a going concern and we're solvent. But let's just run that tape, if you like, if we weren't here. Well, I think, to be honest, there would be those who will look at us and think that's a very easy thing to plug the gap on. And I think the danger is they'll see the mechanics of what we do, and a lot of it seems obvious. We're a charity. Well, maybe some of our contemporaries are a charity. They're an awarding body. Well, we're an awarding body. So, and they'll look at the tasks we carry out and think, yeah, we could do that. But I think in those mechanics of what we do, I think they've missed where the magic lives. The magic doesn't live there in the sort of day-to-day routine tasks. It lives in a much deeper place, a dynamic place, and there's an energy. You won't find anybody in ASDAN who is driven by their employment contract. They're driven by a sense of a vocation, and I think that's the one thing I picked up very early on when I joined. They have a sort of set of skills and expertise and experiences that I don't think you will be able to match very quickly. And that culture, if you like, that we've got, those beliefs, those values, they would also be quite difficult. We look much more holistically than many of our contemporaries, and I think that's a good thing. We look at the whole learner, the whole situation, etc. We look at their life skills. I think there's also a myth out there that we're quite a niche in the way we look at the learners. I think we're far more diverse than people give us credit to. I think we've got a wide angle lens on it, whereas people think we've got a very narrow and focused, sort of sector. And that, I don't think people get that. I think that we'll completely miss that point. And then you think of the flexible assessments that we do. So you put that together and you've got quite a powerful mix that I think it'd be hard to match. But I'll leave you with the motto from my secondary school when I was brought up in Plymouth, and it was stolen unashamedly from a Robert Browning poem, which you might know, and it just said, "The best is yet to be." I think we've heard great things about where we've been and what we've done, but it really feels now that if you are here at ASDAN now and in the next few years, you'll be so proud of yourself for years to come.
You make me emotional, Brian.
Yeah,
Be
but if
careful.
you're not, you'll feel you missed out.
Yeah, definitely. So just to bring this all to a close, is there anything else that you, Alison and Jim, we hope you are going to stay as our patrons for at least another decade, Jim, and maybe longer for you, Alison. Is there anything you want to add?
The only thing I'd add is, as I talk to people who work in schools around the world, ASDAN's also a community of people who have great loyalty to it. And, when we talk about if it didn't exist, I mean, that community would be bereft. And you should be really proud of that. And that's a fantastic foundation to build on.
No, definitely. I think when I first met with you, Jim, you said that I needed to go back and shake hands with our friends and have a conversation with our foes. And I think that's what we've just spent the last 2 years doing. And there are more friends out there that we didn't know about who'd lost ASDAN for lots of different reasons, who are coming back because they've remembered that network that's there, which has been great and very good advice. Alison?
Yeah, I'd just say be courageous and seize the moment.
Definitely. Shall I come to you, Brian?
Yeah, that's right.
As long as you don't make me
I
emotional.
think I totally agree. Bereft's a great word, actually. We don't use it often. I think they would be bereft. But I think they'd also be adrift. I think we would have cast them adrift and with not much coming to rescue them. And if it did come, it wouldn't have been what they needed in the first place. So I think we're in a good place. I think we as you know, we're in, what is it, month one, I think so, of year two of a strategy that gives us everything to play for. I mean, it's so exciting. I mean, it's really good news.
It's great. Okay, so thank you all three of you for your commitment to ASDAN as well.
Thank you for your leadership.
Yes, indeed.
I'm enjoying it. It's nice to be in a job that you really enjoy and feel you're making a difference in as well. I know you both have those jobs, and I'm sure Brian does every time he turns up to a board meeting. But thank you very much for your time today.